back to this channel on 40k lore, commentary, and speculation. I am the Darklight Emissary, here to guide you through brief overviews, deep dives, and other topics in the 40k lore setting. And so if you're new to the setting, I welcome you, and if you're not so new, I also welcome you. This channel is meant to be a straightforward, no light on the jokes, just get some information and, gain interest in a faction if you want to gain that interest, or if you are more established, you can discuss with me or maybe get some insight into a faction you didn't think about from myself, who has been reading these stories and lore for the last 15 years. And so that being said, this episode is on the first Primarchs and the Thunder Regiments, or as they're also known, the Thunder Warriors. Now, these are kind of the first legions of the Emperor, in a way. There was 20 of them. They each were led by a Thunder Warrior titled as a Primarch. However, the leaders were not picked or hand engineered like the Primarchs that came later. They were simply picked for their leadership abilities compared to the rest of the Thunder Warriors. Now, the Thunder Warriors began way far back at the beginning of the Emperor coming out publicly as a force on Earth. The Earth at this point, or Terra as it would become, was racked by many different conflicts over resources after the Age of Old Night, where basically all of humanity's old empires collapsed, and from that rose a bunch of techno-barbarians, which is just basically just another name for warlords and different factions fighting over what was left of Earth, trying to gain power. For unknown reasons, the Emperor came out of not necessarily hiding, but he wasn't publicly known as the Emperor at this point. He came out only known as the Emperor, and with these giant hulking warriors bearing his seal, he started conquering the Earth in what are known as the Unification Wars and the Unification Era. These warriors are bigger than Space Marines, and they are basically the rough draft version of a Space Marine would become. An individual Thunder Warrior is a very powerful, much larger warrior compared to a Space Marine. And in the few instances where some Thunder Warriors have fought Space Marines, they tend to hold their own just fine against a Space Marine. The only force that is capable of really challenging Thunder Warriors in combat is the Adeptus Custodes that we talked about last episode. And that will become a little bit more relevant later on as well. So, the Thunder Warriors were meant as kind of a stopgap to get the Emperor's power consolidated, but they had a lot of genetic issues being a rough draft. They would basically just metabolically fall apart, genetically fall apart. They were prone to rages and instability, much like the World Eaters were kind of known for with the nails, but, with no nails needed, no butcher's nails. But they served their purpose and were a very good force at the time, and for what was needed at the time when there wasn't Space Marines yet. And the Custodes were, as mentioned before, very great warriors, but they were much harder to make. One of the unique things about Thunder Warriors is that they were basically created from adult men. So, there was no having to pick out a baby, let it mature to, over years. There was no picking an adolescence and putting them through trials. You simply, picked out loyal soldiers and turned them into these warriors. But one of the biggest drawbacks to Thunder Warriors is all they were really focused on and good at is warfare. They did not really have an off button out of war. So that was another reason why they didn't really last long term. One of the main things about Space Marines is that while they are sometimes used only for war, especially by some of the legions, as talked about in a lot of my other episodes so far, plenty of legions had plenty of other uses for Space Marines. Robot Goldman, great example. Turning a lot of his warriors into political figures and in political offices. Taking a Space Marine's enhanced age, intellect, and ability to learn things, and applying it towards facilitating making a system run better. The Thousand Sons did that as well, turning their Space Marines into scholars who would basically teach college classes to you, as a normal human. You could go learn how to, do something, and they would teach you. Thunder Warriors couldn't do that. They were very much a blunt tool, whereas a Space Marine is a much more finessed tool, and much more of a multi-tool, capable of many different aspects, even if they're kind of known only for one aspect. And then the Custodes being even that more so. And also less so in some ways, which I will also bring up near the end of the video, an interesting point there. So the Thunder Warriors were active for a little while, helping to unite Earth, and after that happened, after everything fell under the Emperor unleashed the Adeptus Custodes and some of the first Space Marines against the Thunder Warriors to cull them, because since there was not really wars being fought anymore on a large scale, apocalyptic scale even, the Thunder Warriors were a threat. I mean, they were going to possibly boil over and start attacking their own troops. They were that unstable for the most part. And some of the surviving Thunder Warriors are pretty matter of fact about that. They do not seem to resent the Emperor for his choice on how to deal with them. One of the books that I can recommend to you from the Horus Heresy era is called The Outcast Dead. And in that book, we actually get to meet 2 Thunder Warriors that are still alive after this culling. And they actually even explain it to some of these Space Marines in the book. They're like, yeah, the Emperor culled our numbers, and yeah, we don't really see a problem with that. And I remember it being a point in the book where the Marines were kind of surprised at how matter of fact the Thunder Warrior was about, how the Emperor, coldly chose to deal with them. But, the Thunder Warriors were not stupid. They were not they were not idiots, even if they were only a tool for a specific thing. And some of the Thunder Warriors did find purpose afterwards, running groups with their power, with their physique, being able to outmatch anyone around them. And the Emperor, for his part, seemed to kind of forget about them. Maybe he kind of, allowed the more stable ones to kind of exist, even if he knew about them and it wasn't worth expending resources to go after them. And the Thunder Warriors kind of spent time hiding after this era. There's some instances. There's one instance of a Thunder Warrior who runs into a Custode, and they actually work together to hunt down a Chaos Marine. And that was an interesting point. That Thunder Warrior was constantly having visions of old battles. So he was constantly living in a state of flux. And at the end of that story, he asks the Custode to, end his suffering, because he's basically kind of losing himself. And so those are just the kind of the ends these Thunder Warriors were ending up at the end there. Now, the Thunder Warrior in the Outcast Dead, he actually was able to take the progenoid glands from one of the Space Marines that died, and it was able to help him prolong his life. His organs were failing, and he was able to find a process on how to clone these glands. So other than knowing that, we don't know much more about that Thunder Warrior or his companion. They're some of the only Thunder Warriors we know that are alive, and they possibly survived past the Siege of Terra, but there's been no signs of them since that book, which came out a long time ago at this point. But it's just an interesting note to have. Now, when the Custodes called most of the Thunder Warriors, Constantine Valder is actually the one who led that effort, and he ended up in a duel basically with one of the Primarchs of the Thunder Warriors still alive. And this Thunder Warrior is dying to Valdur, and he says to Valdur, you know, at least I died still basically a human. What I see in you is inhuman, like you've lost, you know, part of your humanity. And interestingly enough, and this is something I brought up in the Custode video, Valdur actually agrees with him that he can see rationally that there's something missing about him as a human now, before executing this leader of the Thunder Warriors. So I just find that very interesting, both the observation being given and accepted by Valdur. One other interesting note is supposedly Alfarius was possibly involved in the culling of the Thunder Warriors. This scene is brought up in the Alfarius Primarch novel, and Alfarius even kind of has a brief discussion with Valdur about a few things after that fight happens. I don't remember the specific details off the top of my head, but it's just interesting to note that it's possible that at least one Primarch of the Space Marines was possibly present at the culling of the Thunder Warriors, if Alfarius' account in his own book is to be believed, and that he never left Terra, like his brother Omegon did, more traditionally like the rest of the Primarchs. And so other than that, there's not really too much more to say about the Thunder Warriors. Equipment-wise, they often used many of the same iconic weapons as the Space Marines did. They had one of the first power armor sets. An interesting note about their power armor, actually, that was the first power armor used, and it was actually used by many of the techno-barbarians and troops throughout the Unification War era. So if you look at any of the artwork I put in that show Thunder Warriors, that armor is an echo of like the ancient past, where a lot of forces were using it around Earth, and the Emperor, even so the Emperor's Space Marines were using it at the beginning. They also used chainswords, and they used a large, powerful pattern of the standard Astartes bolter as well. So they used a lot of the same equipment that would become synonymous with Space Marine later on in the setting. And as far as I know, there is no stories or mention of Thunder Warriors existing in the 40k era. This faction seemingly died out from instability sometime after the Horus Heresy and into the Scouring era is probably when the last Thunder Warrior probably passed on, but that's pure speculation on my part. Unless there's some, way they bring a Thunder Warrior in through time skipping through the warp or stasis or something. I've never heard of a Thunder Warrior existing in the 40k era, which makes them a bit unique. And like pretty much nearly every other faction I can think of in the Imperium exists in some way in 40k, except for the Thunder Warriors. I'm sure there's a few others that if you want to leave a comment on, you can bring up for me, but that's off the top of my head. I can't think of one now that I'm thinking of it. So they're a uniquely older faction, and they kind of echoes to like, an 80s style as well, like where 40k was kind of getting started. The Thunder Warriors kind of echo also just like an older styling from that era as well. And they definitely have an interesting look compared to, later patterns of power armor and more modern versions that we see today in the setting. And so that is really it for the Thunder Warriors. Just wanted to give a brief overview of them. They are, as always, I find a lot of these factions interesting. What I really like about the Thunder Warriors is just how they're like a glimpse into the Emperor's past, and into the wars of unification that we only really have names for, more so than any real lore on. There's some names and some battles, but most of it is not really known, and so I kind of like that, something jutting up from the oceans of the past type of feeling that this faction brings. And so As always, please like and subscribe for more of this commentary and speculation. And please leave a comment if you'd like to discuss any aspect of this video or make a correction. I am not perfect at this by any means. A lot of this is my thoughts, after researching some of what I've read over the years and, just kind of like absorbed over time in being in the setting. And as always, bring your light into the dark places, and I will see you in the next video. Leave a comment on any future subjects you'd like me to cover, and have a great day or night wherever you are. Thank you for tuning in and for your support so far. The channel is doing pretty well so far, and I am really grateful for the interest that you're showing me. It really means a lot. Thank you.